The New York Times.
The New York Times.
New op-ed. Luxuriously illustrated.
Yeah.
With the most nauseating images you'll ever see. Weird, like, non-binary people.
It's about sex.
Sucking face or, like, threatening to.
It was about the opinion that was being editorialized was that people should be having more sex. Mm-hmm. Hot take. And that we are in an epidemic of loneliness.
Yeah.
Sex is good. Sex is healthy. Not the way I do it. Sex is an essential part of our social fabric. In use.
Essential part of growing up.
Specifically, should be having more of it. Americans are not having enough sex. Blah, blah, blah. General Social Survey said that more than a quarter of Americans hadn't had sex even once in the past year. 30% of men under 30, a figure that has tripled since 2008. Everyone opining about incels. This person said, in my work as a writer covering sex and culture, I've spoken to dozens of men for whom a lack of sex is the defining characteristic of their daily life. Bitch, I've spoken to hundreds of men. I talk to incels all the time. In my work. In my work as an internet addict, I speak to incels daily. Some are incels, short for involuntary celibates, believers in a toxic, misogynistic ideology. Some believe the pursuit of sex will be entirely futile. Blah, blah, blah. This thinking becomes
it's
cyclical.
Easy to brush these men off as anomalies or to label their state as a result of personal failings or even the consequences of modern masculinity. But while much of the research around the decline in sex focuses upon young men, almost every group of Americans is experiencing the absence of sex. And the consequences are profound. If a lack of sex is affecting the cultural and social participation of these young men, it's likely to be affecting the rest of us too. A lack of sex can easily translate into less socialization, fewer families, and a sicker population.
Yeah, no lies really detected.
Her mention of incels is like good because there's this whole popular fascination with incels, and it has less to do with them being like anomalies and aberrations than with the fact that we all kind of identify with inceldom. There's an incel within.
Exactly. Inceldom is
it's becoming more and more relatable because it's becoming more and more the norm.
Yeah.
Sex is easy to have, but it's even easier to not have sex.
Well, first of all, premarital sex is a sin. So I'm going to just disagree on the outset that people should be having sex, that sex is good. I think no. I think chastity is a virtue. Like, I feel like the incel discourse has evolved past what this article posits and has become like a identity category that like men can be proud of. It's a lifestyle, you know.
Yeah.
It's not that
it's comorbid with high IQ and casual racism.
Yes.
It's a status symbol.
It's a status symbol, yeah.
It's a filtering device.
To be a true cell. And there's a lot of fake cells out there, myself included, you know, people who steal incel valor with these numbers. I don't know if I'm really buying it. But then it does this sinister thing where it's like, it's not the pandemic's fault. It's like,
well, yeah. I mean, they blame the usual culprits, COVID, porn. I've seen people blame obesity, quote, atomization, et cetera, et cetera. But like, again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think that these are all kind of like after the fact rationalizations for the reality that people have lost an interest in sex. And I think, as you pointed out many episodes ago, it's a little different for Zoomers because they were reared on porn and they're porn sick and they don't know any other way.
Again, with the dopamine, I think there's some frying happening.
The demographic manifestation of this is obviously the worldwide decline in birth rates, which, as Michelle Welbeck pointed out on our podcast, is not so much a Western problem as a modern problem, with
Right.
the hardest hit being the Asian countries.
Korea.
The Asians are the original incels.
Otaku
Yeah.
culture, it's
Yeah.
called in Japan, which I've got immense respect for. But yeah, Korea, Japan
Mhm.
are not replenishing at the rates they're supposedly meant to.
Yeah, and I think like, I mean, could this just be also like a delayed effect of sexual liberation? Like, what happens when you make something like sex casually available, when you normalize all the associated taboos, when you remove all the associated risks through the industrial scale availability of things like birth control and STD treatment?
Right.
People get desensitized and eventually lose interest.
Well, that's why I would take basically the exact opposite take of this article and say, like, no, sex is bad. We should as a culture have like a prohibitive or restrictive attitude towards sex, because that's
how you increase the fuck rate. That's how you do it.
Bingo.
By making it taboo again.
Yeah.
Make sex taboo again.
Make sex, yeah.
And that's how you return with a V to horniness.
Right. Because like libidinous drive
doubling down
doesn't come from something that is like permissive,
like easily available.
Yeah.
You have to keep people in line with the threat of shaming and punishment for them to truly unlock their will to horniness.
I think that's true.
You can't double down on this rhetoric of like, sex is good and healthy and it raises your vitamin D levels.
There's a good like Zizek quote or video, maybe even, where he talks about how it's disgusting when people talk about how sex is healthy.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because there's like this double speak going on where it's like,
it's so repulsive.
Sex is positive and good and a welcome development in your life, but at the same time, any expressions of sexuality are like vilified and punished, especially in men.
Mm-hmm.
You can't catcall, you can't proposition, you can't be horny.
No, you can only have sex that is mutually empowering and employs affirmative consent.
Yeah, you can't have sex with younger women.
Nope. Only roasties with complicated pasts. And you both have to be like smiling the whole time and like affirming the act rather than like having some shameful exchange.
And it's like, it reminds me of the Leo discourse, which, you know, periodically rears its ugly head.
Back again. Yeah, yeah.
And somebody was saying, like, do you regard this man with respect or disgust?
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate litmus test. And I was like, what about neither? On one hand, it seems like he's not actually attractive and horny and libidinal playboy.
No.
He's like a dead behind the eyes Russian alcoholic who makes girls wear headphones when he's hitting it from the back and has them.
He wears the headphones and he hits the vape
and makes them sign NDAs.
Yeah.
And he's clearly like weird and stunted. But on the other hand,
Baba Booey.
Do I object to him fucking 19 and 25-year-olds? No, don't
Absolutely
care.
not.
Do not care.
No. How could I care?
The fact that this discourse even exists points to something profoundly lacking in our society.
It's true.
That we have to talk about this like washed up, aged out bachelor for, by the way, doing nothing wrong.
Yeah.
This is the only guy who has like a squeaky clean reputation and that no one's come forward and accused him of any like wrongdoing.
I also don't think he's doing anything. I don't really think he is some like twisted libertine who's like enacting some real like fantasy or like sadistic impulse on these women. He's having literally the most banal sex with them.
Yeah, he's
while vaping.
He's an empty and lonely and vacant person with a lot of disposable income, much like all of us.
We can all relate to that.
You play chess, I return videotapes. Leo has sex with 21-year-old Israeli models.
Okay, good for him.
Whatever
gets you off.
Yeah, whatever gets you through the day.
Yeah.
This was an interesting part of this article. The loneliness epidemic has been brought about by myriad factors that have been exacerbated over the decades. Social media is one culprit. The 20th century's war of attrition against walkable communities is another. And I was like, what is this like walkable cities discourse that I also see crop up from time to time? But it's weird to like shoehorn the walkable cities thing into an article about like why people are like not having sex and why they don't
as
have
if people could
friends.
just walk out their house and fuck someone.
The thing is, like, people also have just become on the whole like less human, so they have less tolerance for what it means to maintain intimate relationships of both the sexual and platonic variety.
Yeah.
Like, on one hand, we all have a need for friends and for lovers. Ugh, I hate that word. But on the other hand, what that entails is also being like reciprocal and responsible to another person.
Yeah, and like approachable and relatively normal and not like a maladjusted weird freak.
And people, really want things on their own terms. Like, they want access to all the holes.
Right, but they don't want to pay the price.
Yeah.
I was just in the Bay Area last weekend, and
how'd that go?
I mean, it's a beautiful, like amazing area. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard's remarks on China come to mind. Yeah.
It really is just unlivable in so many ways.
Yeah, it's like that
but it's gorgeous. It's so pretty.
Hey, they have like the redwoods and the microclimates.
Yeah, lovely, like great scenic drives and just nice. I lived there, but was also like pushed out because they made it a very like unfriendly place for bohemians.
Yeah, and you're like sandwiched between like tech bros and raving homeless lunatics.
Yeah,
there's like nowhere to turn.
It sucks, but I wish it wasn't like that. I'm doing it, but I blame the techies. There was like the Tenderloin. There's always been like a big homeless population.
That's funny because I blame the homeless people. They should all be rounded up, the tech nerds and the homeless people, and made to like duke it out in like a
cage match.
Yeah,
the homeless are gonna win
in like a Mad Max like biodome Hunger Games type scenario.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Did somebody say blood sport?
Let's see who really owns San
The
Francisco.
homeless would win.
They would. Oh my god! Of course, they're so strong.
Do you think the homeless are stronger in the West Coast or in the East Coast? Probably the West, because they're on stimulants.
Spice.
And the weather's nicer.
And here they're on fentanyl.
They're getting vitamin D.
The weather's nicer, but maybe that also makes them more complacent and
laid back.
Exactly. And in the East, they have to fight against the elements, which makes them maybe more resilient and tougher.
It's hard to say. I would love to run a statistical analysis. Just get a nice sample size.
I would say even in San Francisco in like 2011, 2012, my experiences with the unhoused community were much worse than they were in Los Angeles or New York by far.
Like how so?
Like endless torments, like just like real like skitzed out vagrants like every day basically. I mean, I was assaulted many times in Oakland and San Francisco. Like, yeah, crazy people, screaming that they hope I get AIDS and stuff, like all, but like very like routinely. So much so that when I moved,
too bad I already have AIDS. The AIDS of the mind.
I'm on Twitter now. When I moved to Los Angeles, I was like, oh wow. I was relieved by how relatively fewer like altercations I was having with homeless people. But now LA has also become a big, Hooverville.
Hooverville.
But in New York still is just less than LA and San Francisco probably.
And not the way I do it.
Damn.
Yeah, this woman's prescription is that people
who can have sex should.
Yeah, here's a rare opportunity to do something for the betterment of the world around you that involves nothing more than indulging in one of humanity's most essential pleasures. Your doctor may well agree. And having more sex can be an act of solidarity. Ugh. We've already seen what happens when sex becomes a political statement. And that's polyamory. And we don't need any more of that. Sex should be
fuck those maladjusted
thought crime.
Young men. Yeah, definitely. We need a hard prohibition on sex. We need to be more sex negative.
This is what's gonna finally make me become a Catholic.
Yeah.
I'll turn a blind eye to their kitty diddling and money laundering just to have like a magnificent return with a V
to horniness.
to sex. Yeah.